Hi, I'm Leo Finelli, and you're listening to Generation Change. This month, we're bringing you a conversation with the savvy and articulate Isaac Hertenstein. Isaac is the founder of Students Teaching Finance, a youth-led organization with the mission of increasing youth financial literacy and combating economic inequality. Isaac is a passionate advocate for financial literacy education nationwide and empowers other high school students to teach financial literacy in their communities, sparking changes against inequity. I spoke with Isaac about life in his hometown, why financial education is so necessary, and how to navigate the current economic climate.
Hi there.
Hi, I'm Leo.
Nice to meet you, Leah.
So, how did your interest in financial issues start?
Well, basically, I've noticed essentially the haves and have-nots in my community and the financial difficulties that people struggle through. And I also saw the lack of financial education in my schools, in my state, and even across the country, and how that is directly correlated.
And where is it that you live?
So I live in Greencastle, Indiana. It's a rural community.
Yeah, so we're going to do our Drop the Pin segment now, where we focus on how this place has affected you as a person. So you said it was a rural community.
Yeah. So Greencastle is a very rural, a lot of farming, and there are a lot of advantages that come from a small town. So not only is it, being able just to meet other people very easily and practically knowing everyone you see, but also when it comes to creating change and change making, it's very easy to connect with other people and community leaders that in a much larger area or a place where people simply don't know each other, it's so much harder to enact change. So in a smaller town, at a smaller level, it's very easy to connect with others.
And what part of Indiana is this in?
So it's in west central Indiana. So it's about 45 minutes west of Indianapolis, if you know where that is.
Yeah. So when did Students Teaching Finance really start to take off as an organization?
So it was basically started at the end of last year. And that's when the foundations were laid by meeting with community leaders, talking with financial experts, and so on. And then over the summer, my team and I basically developed this curriculum and wrote our own proprietary curriculum. And then starting this year, I've gone into my own community and taught to over 525 students, grades K through 8. And then we've also started, we have our open source curriculum free online for other people to use. And we've also recently started a chapter model. So now there are kids across the country utilizing our curriculum and going into their classrooms and communities to teach financial literacy.
So what have you learned about economic issues while creating STF?
Yeah, so economic issues, what I've learned essentially is they're pervasive everywhere, right? They affect people both at school, both at home, doing travel, literally anything that you want to do, economics affects in some way. And so that's why I think it's so important to have financial literacy that can lead toward a more healthy economic life, because economics and financial lives affect everything that people do.
And how does your financial literacy education differ across age groups?
Yeah, so we wrote this curriculum differentiated basically by elementary, intermediate, and middle school levels. So it's a K through 8 curriculum. So that's about 5 to 13 years old. And so at the younger level, obviously, it's pretty basic foundational financial literacy principles. So we talk about things, like needs versus wants, and the fact that many first graders and kindergartners don't understand that, flipping your light switch on actually costs money. Like you have to pay for that. They don't understand that concept. So what is, rudimentary and basic to us is very important for them to understand to be able to start building a financial future. And then, of course, at the older levels, we talk about much more complex things. At the intermediate level, one of our favorite lessons is about supply and demand and how that economic concept can affect things that you buy at the store, to how much you pay for college, to even getting jobs in the future. And so that's, I think, a very important concept. And then, at the middle school, like 8th grade level, we also talk about things like investing and compound interest and saving for the future, and, a little more of the nuanced financial topics.
In what ways have you seen STF already making an impact?
Yeah, so we do basically pre-test and post-test with the students on almost every lesson. So we've determined that our lessons increase motivation to save and explore diverse careers by nearly 95%. And of course, that's self-reported based on what the students have learned. But that's just one example. And on the more anecdotal level, the students just are genuinely interested in the topics and talk about wanting to discuss it with their teachers, with their parents, and do research on their own to sort of increase their own financial literacy. So I think we're having a real impact on the students.
What this really reminded of when I first read about it was my friend Bianca, who was on the podcast a few months ago. She had this thing called Youth Promise, where she was giving education funding and services that the schools weren't providing, but that she knew were important to kids during the pandemic. And she started it out of her house, and it went global within about a year. Bianca is amazing, and everything she's doing is so necessary. And what you are doing reminded me of it. And I think people like you are like filling the voids that the education system won't cover.
From what you described, I think it's sort of mending a gap in the educational system, which is what I'm trying to do with financial literacy. And it sounds like Bianca is trying to do with other educational resources.
How would someone become an STF educator if they wanted to?
Yeah, so I would encourage anyone listening to go visit our website, which is studentsteachingfinance.org. And there we've started a chapter model where basically we, of course, explain what student teaching finance is and what it does. And we also have compiled resources that we've curated that can educate teachers about financial literacy. And then we hope for students to basically start their own chapters of students teaching finance, which is a tangible link between their school and our broader organization. And then they'll have access to our open source free curriculum and can go into their communities and classrooms to teach. So to get started, simply just visit our website and start a chapter.
And besides students teaching finance, what other kinds of advocacy do you do?
Yeah, so it's all sort of under the umbrella of students teaching finance. But one thing that we've been recently working on is financial legislation that would basically require or mandate a personal finance class for high schoolers. And so 13 states across the country have that. So I know Florida recently passed a widely publicized bill that required it. And I guarantee if you were to go into basically any high school in the country, you'll talk to students who say, oh, I wish we were taught, physical ways to actually interact with money and finances and personal finance. And that is lacking in so many schools, and many students popular-wise want those classes.
Have you ever heard elementary school students openly wanting these classes?
So I haven't, because they're elementary students. That's a great point. But I think starting around middle school, even in like 4th through 6th grade, like intermediate school level, many students begin wanting this. And though obviously I don't think elementary students are capable, or I don't think elementary students even know what personal finance is necessarily. So it's hard for them to want it. But when we go into these lessons, they find them very interesting and they come up with great examples and questions. So though they're not explicitly asking for this type of education, I think it's important and they're very susceptible to it.
Yeah. Would you like to weigh in on the current issues with inflation?
I think it's a very important issue that we're dealing with today that affects personal finance for everyone, even at a young age. In my recent supply and demand lesson, we talk about inflation and how it affects gas prices, for example. Yep, but it's all interesting, and you'd be surprised how cognizant of these issues and inflation that even younger students are.
Yeah, maybe because they may not know where it's coming from, but they have experienced the direct ramifications of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they hear their parents complaining about it at the dinner table, right? So that combined with, oh, we can't afford to go on a road trip this summer, all sorts of things. Like you said, they experience the ramifications.
What are your plans for college and for your future?
So college-wise, I want to study business, ideally either finance or management, something like that. But what I want to do is I think business can be a force for good in the future. And I'm not even sure if I want to necessarily go in like corporate America necessarily, but I think learning about business as an educational field and the theory behind it, combined with its impact on social change, is something that I would really like to study and learn about more in the future.
What colleges are you considering?
Well, I'm from Indiana, so IU, Indiana University, has the Kelley School of Business, which is a phenomenal school, and it's actually in-state tuition, which you can't beat, right?
I think you have a very amazing future ahead of you. You are doing so much good, and you're right. This is things that people are going to need to learn about, and now that I've learned about it, I was myself started thinking it was weird that I never learned about it in school. And I'm like, I feel like I should have learned about it in school. And what do you like to do in your spare time?
So I'm actually a runner. So I love running. I run cross country. I used to run track. Unfortunately, I'm not doing it this year. Other things related to high school, like extracurriculars, I participate in DECA, which is like business CTSO for students who want to involve and kind of learn future skills that they'll need in jobs. And we also do competitions and such. So that's a fun thing. And then another thing I like to do in my free time, I play trumpet. I love playing trumpet and participating in the band and jazz band and marching band and all the fun musical stuff as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I would just like to reiterate that I would love to have more students teaching finance volunteer teachers. So I would encourage anyone listening to please again visit studentsteachingfinance.org and register a chapter.
And how many different states have you had registered chapters in so far?
I believe right now we're only at 3 states. So we're trying to continue expanding though.
And you are going to continue expanding.
Actually, one of them is Missouri and the other one is Virginia. So little bit away, but not too far.
Well, that proves that you have a wide outreach and that there are a lot of people who share your goal. This is going to be big.
Yeah, that's the hope. But I hope to keep expanding and scaling within Indiana and our neighboring states, as well as across the country, and try to affect as many students and communities as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And well, it was so nice talking to you. I love having this conversation. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I loved having you.
Yeah, thank you, Leo. This has been a great conversation.
Bye.
Nice talking to you too. Bye.
The difference between the haves and the have-nots, whether in food, housing, or something else, is easy to notice and has proven difficult to solve. Isaac's description of small-town life and the connection he can find in a place like his was a sharp difference from most of my previous podcast guests, who mostly lived in more densely populated areas. As a topic of conversation, financial literacy and learning about how to manage money were things that I've already been thinking a lot about. I'm on the verge of entering the adult world, living self-sufficiently, and having to afford my own life, as are so many others. Considering the current economic situation, our generation couldn't need this knowledge more as we all approach the point where we'll have to take care of ourselves. You can learn more about Students Teaching Finance and form a chapter on its website, studentsteachingfinance.org, and by following its Instagram @StudentsTeachingFinance. If you'd like to recommend someone you know who is trying to make a difference to be on the show, or if you are someone trying to make a difference and would like to be on the show, email us at generationchange@leofinelli.com. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram @GenChangeWithLF. That's @GenChangeWithLF. Follow and review wherever you get your podcasts, and just share this with your friends and others. Generation Change with Leo Finelli is hosted by Leo Finelli, executive produced by Julie Finelli, and edited by Nick and Leo Finelli. Our original music was composed and performed by Leo Finelli. Thank you so much for listening.